The war room fell silent as the holographic display updated. Red zones spread across the galaxy map like bleeding wounds. Admiral Kaite stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching his entire civilization disappear sector by sector. He had fought the Varathians for 20 years. He had won battles, saved worlds, earned medals that now felt like worthless metal. None of it mattered anymore. 90%, said the tactical officer, her voice barely a whisper. 90% of Coalition space is now under Varathian control. Kite nodded slowly. He had expected this number. The mathematics of extinction were simple enough. The Varathians attacked with perfect coordination. Their ships moved as one massive organism. They never hesitated, never retreated, never made mistakes. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved forward. Across the room, Wu Jin leaned against the wall, still wearing his flight suit. The young pilot had just returned from the defense of Crimson Gate. His squadron had launched with 48 fighters. He came back alone. The burns on his hands were fresh, but he refused medical treatment. He wanted to hear the final briefing, wanted to know how much time they had left. 6 months, Kaite said, answering the question no one dared to ask. 6 months until the Varathians reach the core worlds. After that, there will be nowhere left to run. The Council of 7 Worlds had already convened 3 times that week. Each meeting ended the same way. No solutions, only delays. Every superweapon they built, the Varathians adapted to. Every trap they laid, the enemy avoided. Every alliance they formed, the Varathians crushed. The galaxy was dying, and everyone knew it. Bora sat at her station in the intelligence division, reviewing data streams from the outer sectors. Her job was to find weaknesses in the enemy. But after 5 years of searching, she had found nothing useful. The Varathians had no culture to infiltrate, no politics to manipulate, no economy to sabotage. They were machines with a singular purpose: expand and consume. She rubbed her tired eyes and switched to a different data feed. This one showed recent survey scans from unexplored sectors. It was routine work, the kind of thing that normally went to junior analysts. But Bora needed something different to look at. Something that wasn't red zones and casualty reports. Her screen flickered, showing a small yellow star in Sector 771. The automated survey had flagged it for review. Third planet from the sun, liquid water, oxygen atmosphere, radio signals detected. A pre-warp civilization. Bora almost deleted the file. What did it matter? In 6 months, the Varathians would reach this sector too. These people would die without ever knowing what killed them. But something made her pause. She opened the detailed analysis. The civilization was young, still using primitive rockets and nuclear power. But the radio signals were strange. Thousands of different languages, millions of transmissions, chaos in communication. Most pre-warp species had unified governments by this stage. These people, who called themselves humans, seemed to do everything differently. Bora dug deeper into the cultural data the survey probes had collected. She found recordings of their entertainment, their news, their history. These humans fought wars constantly. They divided themselves by geography, religion, skin color, and countless other reasons. They should have destroyed themselves centuries ago. Yet somehow they survived. She found records of near-extinction events. A plague that killed half their population in the ancient past. Ice ages that should have wiped them out. Wars with weapons that could destroy their entire world. Each time they came close to the edge. Each time they pulled back and continued forward. Bora brought her findings to the council meeting. Chancellor Hyunwoo sat at the head of the table, surrounded by representatives from the 7 surviving worlds. They all looked exhausted. Defeat had a weight that pressed down on everyone. "We don't have time for this," Hyunwoo said when Bora presented her discovery. "A primitive species cannot help us. They barely understand their own solar system." "But they survive," Bora insisted. "Everything in their history suggests they should be extinct. They face impossible situations and somehow find a way forward." "Then they'll face one more impossible situation when the Varathians arrive," said one of the council members. "Thank you, Officer Bora, but we need real solutions." The meeting continued without her. Bora returned to her station frustrated but not surprised. She looked at her screen again, at the small blue planet orbiting its yellow sun. These humans had no idea the galaxy existed. They were alone in the dark, thinking their little world was all there was. That evening, Bora found Admiral Kite in the observation deck. He stood at the window looking out at the Kesper Nebula. His fleet was positioned here, the last major defensive line before the core worlds. When the Varathians broke through, it would all be over. Admiral, Bora said quietly, do you believe in hope? Kite turned to look at her. His face was lined with years of war, but his eyes were still sharp. I believe in mathematics, Officer Bora. The numbers don't support hope. What if there was something the numbers couldn't account for? She told him about Earth, about the humans and their impossible survival. She showed him the data, the recordings, the patterns she had found. Kite listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. You want me to authorize first contact with a pre-warp civilization, he said finally. That violates every protocol we have. Yes, sir. The Council will never approve it. No, sir, they won't. Kite turned back to the window. The nebula glowed in colors that had no names in any language, beautiful and deadly like everything else in this war. He thought about the battles he had fought, the soldiers he had lost, the worlds he had watched burn. He thought about the 6 months they had left. If you're going to violate protocols, he said slowly, do it quietly. Take a small ship, a skeleton crew. Go to this Earth, observe them. If you find anything useful, report back. If not, we've lost nothing but a ship we would have lost anyway. Bora felt something she hadn't felt in years, a small spark in the darkness. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me yet, Kite said. You're probably going on a pointless mission to watch primitives who can't help us. But I'm old enough to know that sometimes the universe surprises us. Maybe these humans will surprise us too. Wu Jin volunteered to pilot the reconnaissance ship. He had nothing left to lose, and the idea of seeing something new before the end appealed to him. Bora assembled a small team, and within 3 days they departed for Sector 771. As their ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, Kite watched them go. He didn't tell anyone else about the mission. The Council would call it a waste of resources. But resources didn't matter anymore. They were all going to die anyway, unless somehow these impossible humans could do the impossible one more time. The reconnaissance ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Bora activated the cloaking device and set a course toward the third planet. She had studied the radio signals during the journey, learning what she could about human languages and culture. These people were fascinating and confusing in equal measure. It's beautiful, Wu Jin said from the pilot seat, looking at the blue and white marble ahead of them. I've seen 1,000 worlds, but something about this one feels different. Bora agreed, though she couldn't explain why. Maybe it was because they didn't know the coalition existed. They were innocent in a way the galaxy had forgotten. She was about to take that innocence away. The ship's sensors began picking up unusual activity. Earth's space agencies had detected something. A massive asteroid on a collision course with their planet. Bora pulled up the calculations. The asteroid would impact in 6 days. The energy release would be equivalent to thousands of their nuclear weapons. It would cause an extinction event. Should we help them? Wu Jin asked. We're here to observe, not interfere, Bora reminded him, but her heart wasn't in it. She watched as Earth's governments began coordinating responses. Every nation with space capability began working together. They launched rockets, prepared evacuation plans, and mobilized resources at a speed that seemed impossible for such a divided species. Daewon sat in the control room of the International Space Station, reviewing the data for the 100th time. He was an astrophysicist, one of the best Earth had, but the numbers kept saying the same terrible thing. They didn't have enough time to deflect the asteroid. Their rockets were too slow, their technology too primitive. We have one option, said Mi-sun over the video link. She represented South Korea on the UN Security Council and had been coordinating the global response. We put every rocket we have on the surface of the asteroid. We detonate them simultaneously. Maybe it changes the trajectory enough. The margin of error is too high, Daewon protested. If we get the timing wrong by even a second, it won't work. Then we don't get the timing wrong. Over the next 4 days, Bora watched humanity do something remarkable. Countries that had been enemies weeks before shared technology freely. Scientists who couldn't speak each other's languages worked together through translators. Launch facilities around the world sent up rockets, each one carrying part of the solution. Sang Min, a retired military strategist, was brought out of retirement to coordinate the final operation. He had spent his career planning for wars that never happened. Now he was planning humanity's last desperate defense against a rock from space. It's not elegant, he told the assembled leaders. It's not even smart. We're basically throwing everything we have at the problem and hoping it works. But hope is what we have left. The day before the asteroid was supposed to hit, all the rockets reached their target. Sang-min gave the countdown. Dae-won held his breath. Mi-sun prayed to gods she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. The explosions lit up Earth's telescopes. For 3 long minutes, no one knew if it had worked. Then the new trajectory calculations came through. The asteroid would miss Earth by 200,000 kilometers. Not elegant, not smart, but enough. That's when Bo-Ra's cloaking device failed. The electromagnetic pulse from all those simultaneous detonations had damaged her ship's systems. Suddenly, Earth's telescopes could see them. A ship that used technology centuries beyond anything humans had, just sitting there in orbit. Every space agency on Earth pointed their instruments at the anomaly. Every government went into emergency session. Dae-won stared at his screen, unable to process what he was seeing. Mi-sun received 50 phone calls in 10 minutes. Sang-min pulled up military protocols that he hoped he'd never have to use. Bo-Ra made a decision. She opened a communication channel on all frequencies. Her translator had learned enough English and other major languages to convey her message. "People of Earth," she said, her voice broadcast to every radio and television on the planet. "Please do not be afraid. We are not your enemy. We are the Galactic Coalition, representatives of thousands of worlds. We came seeking nothing from you. But we found something we did not expect. We found hope." She paused, knowing what her next words would mean. "Our galaxy is dying. An enemy we cannot defeat has conquered almost everything. We have 6 months left before extinction. We watched you face your own extinction and survive through determination and cooperation. We came to observe. But now I must ask, will you help us?" The transmission ended. Bo-Ra waited, knowing she had broken every rule, violated every protocol. She had asked primitives for help because she had nowhere else to turn. The response came 12 hours later. The United Nations had assembled an emergency session. They invited Bo-Ra to land at a neutral location. Mi-sun would lead the human delegation. The meeting took place in Geneva. Bo-Ra brought data files showing the Varathian War, the conquered worlds, the casualties that numbered in the trillions. She showed them battle footage, tactical analyses, everything the coalition had tried and failed to do. The humans sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude of it all. They had just learned aliens existed. Now they were learning the universe was ending. Dae-won was the first to speak. "Show me the Varathian attack patterns again." Bo-Ra replayed the footage. Dae-won watched, his scientist's mind analyzing the data. They move with perfect coordination, every ship in sync. "Yes," Bo-Ra confirmed. "That's their strength. They act as one organism. That's also their weakness." Everyone turned to look at him. Dae-won pulled up his own tablet, making notes. "Perfect coordination requires perfect communication. Perfect communication requires predictable patterns. Predictable patterns can be disrupted." Sang-min leaned forward. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking you're fighting them wrong," Dae-won said. "Dae-won, you're treating this like a conventional war. Ship against ship, technology against technology. But they're not an army. They're more like a system." "A computer," Mi-sun added, understanding. "A very complex computer, but still a computer." "Exactly," Dae-won nodded. "And computers can be hacked. Systems can be disrupted. You don't beat them with bigger weapons. You beat them with chaos." Sang-min stood up, walking to the display. He had spent his life studying military history, every war humans had ever fought. "We've faced enemies with superior technology before. We've faced enemies with superior numbers. We survived by being unpredictable, by changing tactics constantly, by refusing to fight on their terms." Bo-Ra felt that spark of hope grow brighter. "You can do this. You can help us?" "We can try," Mi-sun said. "Give us 72 hours to analyze your data. We'll come up with a strategy. The Council won't accept help from a pre-warp civilization, Bo-Ra warned. Then don't tell them where the strategy comes from, Sang-Min suggested with a slight smile. Tell them your analysts developed it. By the time they find out, either we'll all be dead or we'll have won. Either way, the argument becomes irrelevant. Bo-Ra sent an encrypted message back to Admiral Kite. The message was simple. The humans had ideas. Strange, unconventional ideas that made no sense by Coalition standards. But they were ideas the Varathians would never expect. Kite read the message and allowed himself something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope, not quite, but possibility. These humans had just saved themselves from an asteroid using duct tape and determination. Maybe, just maybe, they could help save the galaxy the same way. The 72 hours began. Humanity went to work. Sang-Min hadn't slept in 48 hours. His office was covered in papers, screens, and holographic displays showing Varathian battle patterns. He had assembled a team of Earth's best military minds, historians, and scientists. They studied every fight the Coalition had lost, looking for patterns. They're too efficient, said Tai Sung, a military engineer who specialized in unconventional weapons. Every movement is calculated. Every attack is optimized. They waste nothing. That's the problem, Sang-Min replied, circling another pattern on his display. They can't waste anything. Their efficiency is perfect, which means it's predictable. If we can introduce inefficiency, introduce chaos into their system, they won't know how to respond. Across the room, Hai Wan worked at her computer station. She was a former hacker who now worked for the government cybersecurity division. She had been analyzing the Varathian communication protocols looking for vulnerabilities. Found something, she announced. Their ships communicate every 0.3 seconds. Perfect synchronization, but look what happens when I simulate a delay. She ran her program. The simulated Varathian fleet formation wobbled. Even a microsecond delay creates confusion in their system. Nari, a Coalition xenobiologist who had joined the human team, stared at the results. We never thought to try that. We assumed their communication was unbreakable. Everything can be broken, Haywan said with a tired smile. You just have to find the right weakness. On the third day, they presented their findings to Bo-Ra. The plan was insane by Coalition standards. Instead of building bigger ships or more powerful weapons, the humans proposed fighting with unpredictability. We call it the Chaos Protocol, Sang-Min explained. Small, fast ships equipped with AI that makes random tactical decisions. The Varathians predict enemy movements based on logic and efficiency. Our AI will make illogical decisions. It will waste resources, make bad tactical choices, do things that make no sense. Why would we want to make bad decisions? Bo-Ra asked, confused. Because the Varathians won't understand them, Taesung answered. He brought up his designs. These fighter ships are small and cheap to build. We can produce hundreds for the cost of one Coalition cruiser. They'll be piloted by AI programmed to be creative, to try new things, to fail and adapt. Hei-Wan added her contribution. And while your random fighters distract them, we introduce this. She displayed her virus. It doesn't destroy their communication. It just delays it. 1 microsecond here, half a second there. Their perfect coordination becomes imperfect. They start making mistakes. Bo-Ra looked at the plans, her mind struggling to accept what she was seeing. Everything about it violated military doctrine. It was wasteful, inefficient, and chaotic, which meant it might actually work. The Council will never approve this, she said. Then we test it without approval, Sang-Min suggested. 1 battle. If it fails, we've lost nothing. If it succeeds, the Council will have to listen. Bo-Ra sent the plans to Admiral Kite. She expected rejection. Instead, she received coordinates. Theta Station. A minor outpost about to be overrun by Varathian forces. The Admiral was giving them their test. Taesung worked around the clock to modify 50 Coalition fighters according to human specifications. Hei-Wan installed her virus and transmitter drones. Nari helped coordinate between human and Coalition engineers. Wu Jin volunteered to lead the fighter squadron, with human pilots training him in their unconventional tactics. Forget everything you learned in Academy, said one of the human instructors. Stop thinking about optimal firing solutions. Stop thinking about efficient energy management. Think about surprising your enemy. Think about doing something they'll never expect. Wu Jin struggled with this concept. His entire career had been built on precision and efficiency. Now humans were telling him to be sloppy, to be creative, to be random. The day of the battle arrived. Theta Station sent out desperate distress calls. 500 Varathian ships approached in perfect formation. The coalition had assigned 50 fighters to its defense, expecting them all to die, buying a few extra hours. Wu Jin led his squadron into position. The modified fighters felt strange, lighter and faster than standard coalition craft. The AI co-pilot made suggestions that seemed insane. "Recommend barrel roll," the AI said. "There's no tactical reason for a barrel roll," Wu Jin replied. "Exactly." The Varathian fleet opened fire. Wu Jin's squadron scattered in patterns that made no geometric sense. Ships flew upside down, spun unnecessarily, wasted energy on movements that served no purpose. The Varathian targeting systems kept recalculating, unable to predict where the fighters would go next. HFY activated her virus. The transmitter drones broadcast their payload into the Varathian network. Instantly, the enemy fleet's perfect synchronization began to fracture. Ships fired half a second too late. Formation adjustments came a microsecond too slow. Wu Jin watched in amazement as Varathian ships began colliding with each other, their coordination broken. His fighter's AI suggested an attack run that involved flying through debris and firing backwards while spinning. It was the stupidest thing he had ever heard. He did it anyway. The attack worked. 3 Varathian ships exploded, unable to defend against an assault that made no tactical sense. Across the battlefield, the same scenario played out 50 times. Human-designed chaos met Varathian order and order lost. The fighters wove through the enemy fleet like dancers, never following a pattern, never repeating a move. Every attack was different. Every evasion was unique. 3 hours later, the battle ended. 450 Varathian ships were destroyed or disabled. Theta Station survived. The coalition had lost 12 fighters. The galaxy hadn't seen a victory like this in 50 years. News of the battle spread across coalition space within hours. Admiral Kite forwarded the combat footage to the council. Chancellor Hyunwoo watched it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. "How did we win?" he asked. "We didn't," Kite replied. "Humanity did." The council convened an emergency session. Bora was called to explain. She presented the human strategy, the chaos protocol, and the results. The council members sat in stunned silence. "You're telling us that primitives developed a strategy we couldn't?" one member finally asked. "I'm telling you that sometimes the best solution comes from a fresh perspective," Bora answered carefully. "Humans have spent their entire existence fighting impossible odds. They've learned to think differently than we do." Hyunwoo looked at the battle footage again. "What else can they offer?" "Everything," Bora said. "They want to join the war. Earth's nations have voted. They know the risk. They want to help." The debate lasted for hours. Some council members argued that accepting human help would be humiliating. Others pointed out that pride was a luxury they couldn't afford. Finally, Kite spoke. "I fought this war for 20 years, he said quietly. "I've watched good soldiers die following tactics that didn't work. The humans won a battle we would have lost. I don't care if they're primitives. I don't care if it's humiliating. I care about survival. And right now these humans are our best chance." The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity was officially invited to join the Galactic Coalition's war effort. On Earth, the news was met with mixed reactions. Some people celebrated, excited to join the galactic community. Others protested, afraid of the danger. But enough volunteered to crew the ships, to fight the battles, to stand against the darkness threatening to consume everything. Mi-sun gave a speech at the United Nations. "We've spent our entire history fighting each other," she said. "Maybe it's time we fought for something bigger. Maybe it's time we showed the universe what humanity can do." 6 months, Admiral Kite had said. 6 months until extinction. Now, with humanity's help, maybe they had a chance. The Varathian advance had stalled at Theta Station. For the first time in decades, the red zones on the map stopped spreading. The war was far from over. But for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy had something it thought it had lost. It had hope. 6 months after humanity joined the war, the impossible continued to happen. The Varathian advance didn't just stall, it reversed. For the first time in a century, the coalition was winning territory back. Jin Ho commanded the human fleet division assigned to the Orion sector. He was a former naval officer who had trained his entire life for battles that were supposed to be theoretical. Now he fought real wars across light years of space. His crew came from 20 different Earth nations, speaking a dozen languages, but they worked together with the kind of coordination that came from shared purpose. 3 Varathian cruisers entering sensor range, reported his tactical officer. Standard attack formation. Jinho studied the display. Standard was the key word. The Varathians still used the same tactics that had conquered 1,000 worlds. They couldn't understand that those tactics no longer worked. Remember what we studied last week? Jinho asked his bridge crew. The siege of Carthage, sir? Someone answered, exactly. The Romans couldn't take the city walls, so they didn't try. They cut off supplies and waited. Let's do the same. Navigation. Plot a course around the cruisers. Weapons target their supply lines behind them. The Varathians expected a direct confrontation. Instead, the human fleet simply avoided them and destroyed their support ships. Within hours, the 3 cruisers were stranded, low on energy, unable to coordinate with their fleet. They were captured intact, the first time the coalition had managed such a feat. Admiral Kite watched the battle reports with something approaching disbelief. The humans were teaching the entire coalition how to fight. Every week they introduced new tactics pulled from Earth's military history. Strategies from ancient China, formations from medieval Europe, lightning strikes borrowed from old Earth wars adapted for space combat. Yujin, a coalition diplomat, found herself working closely with human cultural advisors. She had expected humans to be strange and alien. Instead, she found them surprisingly relatable. They laughed, they mourned, they hoped and feared just like any other species. But they had something extra, something the coalition had lost during its long defeat. You never give up, she said to Misun during one of their meetings. Even when losing, you keep fighting. It's not about winning or losing, Misun explained. It's about refusing to accept that the fight is over. Humans have lost plenty of battles, but we've never accepted that we're beaten until we actually are. That attitude spread through coalition forces. Wujin's squadron, now called the Irregular Guard, trained other pilots in human combat methods. They learned to trust their instincts, to improvise, to see battle as an art rather than a science. The transformation was remarkable. Pilots who had been flying by training manuals for years suddenly discovered creativity they didn't know they had. So he, a human medical officer stationed on a coalition medical ship, made a breakthrough while treating captured Varathian units. She noticed their biomechanical interfaces responded strangely to certain sound frequencies. It's similar to something we have on Earth called brown noise, she explained to Ray, a frequency that affects biological systems. For Varathians, it disrupts their connection to the hive mind. Can we weaponize it? Nari asked. We can try. 2 weeks later, coalition ships were equipped with harmonic disruptors. The weapons didn't kill Varathians. Instead, they severed individual units from the hive mind. Suddenly, the coalition could capture enemy soldiers, study them, even communicate with them. The first Varathian unit they successfully isolated was a pilot from a damaged fighter. When it regained consciousness, separated from the hive, it seemed confused. Where is the connection? It asked in clicks and electronic sounds that translators converted to language. Where is the voice? You're alone now, so he said gently. Can you tell us about the Varathians? About your purpose? Purpose is unity. Unity is purpose. Individual is error. I am error. The philosophical implications were staggering. The Varathians weren't just a hive mind. They were a species that had completely abandoned individuality. Every unit was part of the whole. Being separated was like being unmade. Jinho's finest moment came at the Battle of Orion's Belt. A Varathian fleet of over 2,000 ships was advancing toward a cluster of inhabited worlds. The coalition had 600 ships to defend with. By every calculation, it was a suicide mission. We're not going to fight them head-on, Jinho announced to his commanders. We're going to use the asteroid belt itself as a weapon. The Orion belt was dense with debris, rocks ranging from pebbles to planet-sized masses. Coalition ships had always carefully navigated around it. Jinho planned to navigate through it. We'll use tactics from old Earth naval warfare, he explained. Guerrilla ambushes, hit-and-run attacks using terrain for cover. The Varathians will follow us into the belt because they can't conceive of us willingly entering hazardous terrain. His commanders thought he was insane, but they had learned to trust human tactical thinking, no matter how crazy it seemed. The battle lasted 3 days. Coalition ships darted between asteroids, appearing and disappearing, attacking from impossible angles. The Varathians followed in their perfect formations, which made them easy targets when Jinho's forces triggered carefully placed explosives that sent asteroids careening into enemy ships. When it ended, 800 Varathian ships were destroyed. The Coalition lost 97 vessels. The worlds were saved. Jinho became a legend across Coalition space. Humans called him a hero. He called himself lucky, but luck had nothing to do with it. Humanity was changing the galaxy's understanding of warfare. War wasn't just about technology or numbers. It was about creativity, adaptation, and the willingness to try things that seemed impossible. Tai Sung continued developing new weapon systems based on human principles. He created mines that moved randomly instead of staying stationary. He designed ships with modular components that could be reconfigured mid-battle. He even built a vessel that looked like a Varathian cruiser, but flew like a human fighter, causing massive confusion in enemy ranks. The cultural exchange went both ways. Humans learned from Coalition science, advancing their technology by centuries in months. But more importantly, Coalition species learned from human culture. They discovered human music, art, literature, and philosophy. They learned about concepts like resilience, improvisation, and hope. Wu Jin found himself reading human military philosophy during his off hours. He discovered ancient texts by writers named Sun Tzu and Clausewitz. He learned about generals like Hannibal and Napoleon. These humans had been fighting and studying war for thousands of years. They had developed an understanding of conflict that went beyond simple tactics. War is not about destroying the enemy, he read. It's about breaking their will to fight. That became the new Coalition strategy. Stop trying to destroy every Varathian ship. Instead, disrupt their coordination, capture their units, force them to waste resources. Attack their logistics, their communication, their ability to function as a unified force. The Varathian advance had stopped. Now it was retreating. Red zones on the map began turning neutral gray as worlds were liberated. It wasn't fast and it wasn't easy. Every battle cost lives, both human and Coalition. But they were winning. 3 years into humanity's involvement, the galaxy looked different. The Varathians still controlled vast territories, but they were losing. Their perfect machine was being dismantled piece by enemies they couldn't predict or understand. Chancellor Hyunwoo stood before the council, looking at updated maps. We have reclaimed 15% of lost territory. Casualty rates are down by 40%. Morale is the highest it's been in decades. All thanks to the humans, Kite added. They gave us more than tactics. They gave us a reason to believe we could win. The war wasn't over. The Varathian core worlds remained untouched. And the hive mind's central consciousness still coordinated billions of units. But for the first time, victory seemed possible. Not guaranteed, but possible, that was enough. Hope, as humanity had proven, was a powerful weapon, sometimes the most powerful weapon of all. The war room was silent as Admiral Kite presented Operation Last Light. Every tactical simulation showed the same result: catastrophic failure. The Varathian Prime Nexus was protected by layers of defenses that had never been breached. It coordinated the entire Varathian fleet, billions of units across hundreds of systems. Destroying it would end the war. Reaching it seemed impossible. We've run every scenario, Kite said. Every approach results in 95% casualties before we even reach the inner defenses. Then we need a scenario you haven't run, said Daewon. He had been working with Haewon and a team of human programmers for months. They had cracked the Varathian communication protocols completely, learning to read every signal, every command, every piece of data flowing through the hive network. The Varathians have been studying us too, Daewon explained. Every battle they collect data. They're trying to understand how we think, and they can't. We've monitored their internal communications. The hive mind is struggling with a fundamental paradox. He displayed intercepted Varathian data. The messages were strange, almost philosophical. Humans employ illogical tactics that succeed. Contradiction detected. Efficiency protocols violated, yet objectives achieved. Analysis incomplete. Further study required. They're confused, Haewon added with a slight smile. The hive mind has never encountered anything it couldn't analyze and predict. We're breaking their understanding of reality. Jinho leaned forward. You're saying they don't understand us. How does that help us reach the Prime Nexus? We give them something even more impossible to understand, Sangmin answered. He had been consulting ancient Earth philosophers and military theorists. We attack their logic itself, not with weapons but with ideas. The plan they proposed was insane even by human standards. They would capture Varathian units, sever them from the hive, then reconnect them carrying a payload that wasn't a virus or a weapon. It was information. The complete history and culture of humanity. Everything, Daewon said. Art, music, poetry, comedy, tragedy, philosophy, wars. Peace treaties, love stories, horror films, children's lullabies, scientific papers, religious texts. Everything that makes us human. We flood the hive mind with information it cannot categorize or understand. That's not a military strategy, one coalition admiral protested. Exactly, Sang-min replied. That's why it might work. Mi-sun supported the plan before the council. The Varathians are a collective consciousness. They process information through pure logic. Human culture is fundamentally illogical. We create art for beauty's sake. We tell stories that aren't true. We make music that serves no survival purpose. We love, we laugh, we cry for reasons that make no logical sense. If we can inject that into their system, we might disrupt them from within. Chancellor Hyunwoo looked at the human representatives. 3 years ago, these people had been primitives who barely understood space travel. Now they were proposing to hack a galactic hive mind using poetry and paintings. If this fails, we lose everything, he said. If we don't try, we lose anyway, Mi-sun countered. At least this way, we lose trying something new. The operation required precision coordination. Jin-ho would lead the main assault fleet, a direct attack on the prime nexus that every analysis said would fail. Kaitai's forces would attack from 3 other vectors simultaneously. The goal wasn't to win. It was to be such a chaotic distraction that the hive mind would focus all attention on the battle. Meanwhile, So-hee and a team of human specialists would guide captured Varathian units through the reintegration process. They had 50 units, each one loaded with terabytes of human cultural data. When reconnected to the hive, they would upload everything. Woo Jin volunteered to fly one of the most dangerous missions, guiding the captured units through Varathian defenses and back into the hive network at the nexus itself. He would be flying into the heart of enemy territory with no backup and minimal weapons. Why? Bora asked him the night before the operation. Because 3 years ago I watched my entire squadron die while I ran away. Woo Jin said quietly, I've been running my whole life. From the Varathians, from fear, from the idea that we couldn't win. The humans taught me something. Sometimes you have to fly straight at the thing that scares you most. The day of Operation Last Light arrived. Coalition and human forces numbered 50,000 ships. Facing them were 2 million Varathian vessels, all coordinated by the prime nexus. The defense grid around the nexus would take years to penetrate using conventional tactics. Jin-ho gave the order to attack. The battle was chaos incarnate. His fleet used every trick humanity had taught them, every unconventional tactic, every impossible maneuver. They fought with the kind of beautiful madness that had defined human warfare for millennia. The Varathian fleet responded with perfect coordination, but that coordination was beginning to fracture. H1's viruses, improved over 3 years, created delays throughout their network. Ships fired at where targets used to be. Formation adjustments came seconds too late. Kitei's forces struck from 3 directions simultaneously, each using different tactics from different eras of human military history. The Varathians tried to adapt, but adaptation required prediction and humans had become unpredictable. Woo Jin flew through the battlefield with his precious cargo. His ship dodged fire that should have killed him 12 times. His AI co-pilot suggested maneuvers that violated every rule of physics and common sense. He followed every suggestion. So he monitored the captured Varathian units in his cargo hold. They were conscious now, aware but confused. You're going home, she told them gently. You're going to show your people something they've never seen before. The ship reached the Nexus defenses. Woo Jin activated a program Haewon had designed. His ship began broadcasting every human radio signal ever recorded. Music, news broadcasts, phone conversations, television shows, everything. The Varathian defenses tried to process the information and couldn't. Their targeting system stuttered, overwhelmed by data that made no sense. Woo Jin broke through. He reached the connection point where Varathian units interfaced with the Nexus. He released his cargo. 50 units, each carrying the entire weight of human culture, reconnected to the hive mind. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Varathian fleet stopped moving. Every ship, every unit, every weapon went silent. The hive mind was processing information it had never encountered before. Inside the prime consciousness, something unprecedented was happening. It experienced Mozart's symphonies and death metal simultaneously. It absorbed Shakespeare and modern manga. It processed scientific papers and religious philosophy. It saw humanity's wars and peace treaties, its cruelty and compassion, its logic and madness. The hive mind tried to categorize the information and failed. Tried to find patterns and found only chaos. Tried to understand purpose and discovered humans did things for no reason, except that they wanted to. The concept of want, of individual desire, was alien to a consciousness that had only ever known collective purpose. For the first time in its existence, the Vorathian prime consciousness experienced doubt. Then curiosity. Then something that might have been fear or might have been wonder. It was experiencing individuality, the sense that it was separate from the information flowing through it. The silence lasted for 3 hours. Then a message broadcast across every frequency, in every language the coalition knew and several they didn't. Explain yourselves. 2 words that changed everything. The Vorathians weren't attacking. They were asking. A hive mind that had never questioned anything was now asking questions. Daewon was the first to respond. We are individuals, each of us unique, each of us capable of creating, destroying, loving, hating, making choices that don't follow logical patterns. We are chaos that somehow works. This is inefficient, the Vorathian consciousness responded. Yes, Misun agreed. Very inefficient. Also beautiful, frustrating, surprising, and worth preserving. You've spent centuries trying to bring order to the galaxy. But order without chaos is stagnation. You need both. The conversation continued for days. The Vorathian fleet remained motionless, not attacking, not retreating. Individual units began making independent decisions for the first time. Some continued fighting. Some stopped. Some did nothing. Some asked to learn more. The prime consciousness was fracturing but not breaking. It was evolving, becoming something new. A collective that also contained individuals. A hive that allowed for independence. 3 years later, Kitai stood on Earth, attending the dedication of the Galactic Memorial. It honored all species who had fought in the war, human and alien alike. The Vorathians had sent representatives, individual units who now chose their own names and purposes. The galaxy was rebuilding. Former Vorathian worlds were joining the coalition. Some Vorathian units remained hostile, clinging to the old ways, but most had accepted their new individual existence. They struggled with it. These beings learning to be themselves after eons of unity. Bo-Ra published her book about humanity's intervention. It became required reading across coalition space. Daewon and Nari ran the Human Alien Research Institute, studying how different species could learn from each other. Jin-Ho commanded the joint fleet, human and coalition ships working together.